In an ever-changing world, Life Changes Network presents a show about everything. This is Life Changes with Filippo, with the unforgettable, ever-insightful conversations that captivate our fascination and insatiability for the inspiring moments of real-life journeys as we, as one, strive for higher planes of existence and a better understanding of our true selves and the world in which we live, always remembering life changes. This is radio like you've never felt before, with tonight's guest, Neil Kramer, author, The Unfoldment. And now your host, our MC, the master of change, Filippo Voltaggio.
I am glad we have Neil Kramer on the show today because I have so many questions for him about the quote-unquote unfoldment, which is actually the title of his book that just came out. He has others, but how interesting and uncanny that this is the book that we're talking about today. Because have you ever had something go on in your life that you have successfully avoided because you didn't feel you had anything to do with it, or people you've avoided, and then one day the situation or the people appear in your life right in your face, and you can no longer avoid it? Well, there has been something I've been avoiding for many, many, many years, and happily so. I felt I had no interest in this particular happening. It wasn't my thing. I didn't really understand certain people and what they were doing and all that. And it just so happened that this weekend I found myself really, really, really close, proximity-wise, because of work, to San Francisco. And I have many friends that live in San Francisco, and one in particular who has asked to see me over and over again, and whom I wanted to see. And so I thought, wow, I am literally just almost down the street from this friend. I should go visit him. This is a perfect time to do this. So I thought. So I call up my friend, and of course he's very excited. Come. So I arrive. I arrive in San Francisco on Saturday afternoon, and behind me, police, barricades, they're blocking the streets, they're closing things down, and I thought, what is happening? And I get to my friend's house, and I park, and my friend says, wow, you just made it. You wouldn't have been able to go through this street had you not. And I said, what is going on? He says, it's Gay Pride weekend in San Francisco. And I thought, no, I've been avoided these. I've been leaving town whenever there is one of these. I don't get it. It's just not my thing. And, crowds, blah, blah, blah. And here it was, smack in my face, right where my friend lives. And we couldn't go out or do anything without all of this being in our face. And so Sunday was the parade, the big, for those of you who don't know, the big gay pride parade where people march in the streets being proud of being gay. I think that's the concept. And this is no small thing. They close literally miles of street in big downtown San Francisco, and the parade literally goes for, I'm told, over 5 hours. Now, I say I'm told because, again, I didn't have particular interest in seeing the parade or being in anywhere near it, but like I said, it was there, and I couldn't avoid it. And so as we came out of the metro at one point, my friend says, there's the parade going down. I said, I thought it started at 9 o'clock, and this was 1 o'clock in the afternoon. He says, it's still going. And so he says, let's just watch a couple minutes of it. I watched 5 minutes of it. And I started getting emotional. And later, when I was talking to my friend about it, he says, what was going on with you? And I said, I think I can encapsulate it into three thoughts. The first thought was, wow, these are people marching down a street saying, I am what I am. And other people are hooting and hollering and cheering and applauding for them just being who they are. What a concept. I mean, that's kind of beautiful in a way. The second thing I was thinking is that there has been a lot of hate here. This is a part of the population that has been feared or rejected, spoken badly against, or kicked out of homes, or kicked out of schools, or jobs and churches and the army and you name it. But this parade, which is lasting 5 hours, and the people in it are only a small part. The people watching it are also another part who have experienced that. And this does not just happen in San Francisco, though it may be one of the bigger ones. This happens in almost every major city in the world. This is a lot of hate that has been perpetrated on a lot of people. But my thought process went far beyond just the people marching. It went beyond this social group, and it went to people who have been hated upon because of their religion, and people who have been hated upon or feared because of their color or their race, their beliefs, their look. It goes on and on and on. And I thought, there's been a lot of hate on probably everybody at one point or another, if not still and always. And so I got emotional about that, saying, wow, we talk about peace in the world, and yet when you really look at it, there's hate. There's been a lot of hate. And so that made me emotional. And the third thing I'm thinking is, these people maybe have something. What if women who don't want to wear burqas can make a parade and march down some Muslim streets and have other women cheer them on and applaud them, and just for them being who they are, dressed as they want to dress, or other repressed peoples of the world doing that throughout. Maybe instead of a pride parade once a year in every major city of the world, we should have a pride parade every month in every major city of the world, with different social groups or different groups being able to march down the street and have people applaud them for just being who they are. Because ultimately, don't we all just want to be who we are? And so here was something I've been avoiding, and it smacked me in the face, and it said, you got to pay attention for this moment. And I did. And I got so much out of those few minutes. And for that, I'm grateful. And because of this unfolding of my own fears and anger or judgment as well, I'm glad that we have Neil Kramer on the show so we can talk about unfolding to the magic of our own personal existence, our lives, for each and every one of us, and ultimately for all. We'll be talking to Neil Kramer right after this.
Clean water is not enough. Reverse osmosis, distilled water, and most bottled waters are devoid of naturally occurring minerals. They are acidic, unstructured, and hard to absorb and rob minerals from the body. IonWay's ionizers produce a superabundant supply of powerful antioxidants in each glass. Ionized water has a reduced molecular cluster size and a negative charge, hydrating you up to 6 times better. Water from an IonWay's ionizer will help you restore your body to its natural pH balance, boosting your vitality. And ionized water more effectively flushes acidic toxins from within your body. Drink the healthiest water available today. IonWay's water systems, their water changes everything. To learn more about IonWay's water systems and how you can own one today, visit our website at lifechangeswithfilippo.com and click on our sponsor page. You are listening to Life Changes with Filippo on the BBS Radio Network with your host, Filippo Voltaggio. You can visit us online via Twitter and Facebook and at lifechangeswithfilippo.com. That's Filippo, Filippo.
I am Filippo, and our guest is Neil Kramer, who is an English writer and philosopher specializing in the fields of consciousness, metaphysics, shamanism, and ancient mystical disciplines. Neil has made a lifelong independent study of philosophy, mysticism, shamanism, religious traditions, inner alchemy, occultism, and esoteric world history. He shares his path of transformation and empowerment in writings, interviews, and lectures, as well as giving one-on-one teachings and group workshops. And he's with us today on our radio show, Life Changes with Filippo. Thank you, Neil, for being with us. Welcome.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, Neil, I couldn't help to think while I was sharing that monologue with our audience that you must have had some growth into all of this mysticism and all of that, or were you born into it and everybody thought it was cool that you were doing that?
I think it's one of those things that, hand on heart, I can say has been there from the beginning with me, in that from as early as I can remember, I looked at the world askance, as one might say, out of the corner of my eye. I always felt that there was an awful lot of it absent from our perceptions. And so really from a young age, I had a metaphysical or mystical curiosity. And of course, as a young man or a woman or whatever, you tend to focus on phenomena, and you're interested in the paranormal and extraterrestrials and aliens and the very hard anomalies that might present itself in that aspect. And then that really took me to the root of those things, which is always a spiritual path. So for as long as I can remember, I have studied these matters, and coming from Britain and having travelled, quite extensively around Europe, I kind of soaked up all our religious, metaphysical and mystical heritage, whatever I could get my hands on, basically. So it's been a long path. We won't go into tremendous detail because we've got a limited amount of time. But yes, it's been a long and fascinating journey up to now.
Well, I think we should have a parade then for people like you as well.
Well, thank you. That would be lovely.
It would be, I'm sure. So now I'm fascinated by the title in itself of the book, The Unfoldment, and even more so, of course, by the concepts within it. So let's start with that alone, the title. Why The Unfoldment?
Well, for people who may have been walking a spiritual path for some time, we could say that the unfoldment is the classical process of awakening, of enlightenment, and of attaining a form of psychic clarity. But in addition to those things, what I put forth in this book is a very definite endeavor to foster a certain kind of attitude, a particular approach to life, to transformation and to change. And that approach is very much a state of being, and it means that we go into shadow just as much as we go into light. It means that we face hardship. It means that we establish a certain kind of warrior deportment in life. So, as the Buddhist would say, that life is struggle, to quote the Buddha a little more accurately than often is said, the struggle is part of the training. It's part of boot camp earth, if you like. And part of the unfoldment, part of the techniques and philosophies within it is to say, this is a good thing. Struggle is your friend. Struggle is a good thing. To make it not painful, though, and to make it not necessarily something bad, we have to shift our attitude to that. Rather like the soldier would shift their attitude to personal fitness or to toughness or to being able to run up a mountain. In Britain, our special forces, the SAS, run up mountains in Wales, which are very, very arduous. It's one of the hardest physical tasks a man or woman could ever be asked to do. And I like to think that having a certain attitude about that makes that a hell of a lot easier. And so I often say to those who I work with, personally and particularly, nothing phases those who are unfolding, because they preempt everything with their own consciousness. They own the trials and tribulations of life, the sort of things that most people really feel just kind of happy to them. On this path, with this formulation of spiritual awareness, I turn that completely around. and propose to the spiritual student that when they begin this journey of sacred selfhood, you blur the boundaries between what you create and what happens to you. They become one thing. It's not just stuff happens. It's not just accident. There's no coincidence. And this brings a tremendous power and balance to the individual.
So, is the suffering part of life? Like everybody has to have something that they come into this world with something that they have to suffer with?
Well, to some extent, it's funny. This is kind of ongoing dialogue with a few people that I discuss such things with on a regular basis. I have a sneaking suspicion that initial hardship is almost like a prearranged agreement to say, let's make this tricky at the start. Let's make this a little bit spiky so you won't forget. You won't drift into insentience. You won't drift into forgetfulness. So it's not by accident, and I think the listeners will smile when they hear this, that most spiritual people have difficult parents, one or more, or a difficult family, some kind of imbalance in the family unit. And I have never spoken to anybody who has a perfect kind of, Walton's situation. And it's like if you were a detective, you would look at that and think, let's profile that. And it seems that to some extent you create a situation of almost comical difficulty rather, and that is a kind of fail-safe to say, don't forget what you're doing here. Don't forget that. And as soon as you begin to wake up, then all the things that most people run away from, depression, pain, anxiety, etc., start to fade. They start to dissolve. So being happy becomes easy. It becomes just something that accompanies you on this journey of unfoldment. And every time something kind of trips you up, or every time you run into a quandary, you instantly realize that it's a gift, it's an opportunity for growth, pretty much in any situation. And of course, we don't want tremendous levels of physical pain, but it seems to be that the sharper you are, the more honed your awareness is in this unfoldment, the less likely you are to get very gross, shall we say, base lessons. You don't need to get in very, very trying and painful situations. They become more and more and more subtle. And as you develop greater attainment and greater acuity in your awareness, your adventure becomes more your own direction, not just something that happens, but something that you actually create. And that's, very much a reciprocal energy exchange.
Wow. So is that the key then to claiming your personal power, by owning that?
I would say that understanding sovereignty is one of the most important steps for claiming power. Knowing that you are absolutely your own authority, that in fact no one can truly inform you about what is true or untrue except yourself. And though we may know this intellectually, of course, you and I probably hear these things all the time, and the listeners read it and see it and chat about it, you have to bring it into your life experience, into your felt, living, embracing experience before it becomes real gnosis. And this takes a little practice, but the rewards are vast. So you have to take a certain sort of responsibility. If you want to create your own life, you have to put your hand up and say, yes, this is mine, all of it, every single piece of it, all things that occur, they are mine. And a lot of people, if they were, as I sometimes say, on the electric chair of truth and they couldn't tell a wrong answer or they would get electrocuted, a lot of people don't really want that responsibility. They want to tweak the edges of it, make things a bit more interesting and a bit deeper and a little bit more satisfying. But to take full ownership of things is something that human beings are never taught to do. We're always taught to have someone else representing that ownership for us in parliament or government or whatever. That goes out of the window with the unfoldment. You own all of it.
Wow. And that's when you start living authentically, of course.
That is when you live authentically, and that is when you gain true power as a human.
And then life becomes fulfilling.
It does. It becomes fulfilling. It becomes fun. It becomes more joyous. You get to create what you want. You get to destroy what you don't want in a harmonious way, in the way that you might destroy a cloud in the sky. You don't necessarily have to go up there and bash it. You change its aspect. You change its reality. You create something new. So there's always a balance. Whenever something is dissolved, something else is created to replace it. So we don't want people going around destroying things without creating something better. So it's no use just to be radical, just to smash and be iconoclastic. We have to create, we have to be artisans of consciousness, not just people who talk about it, but people who actually make something.
So when you say repatterning old wiring, is that, for example, one of the major ones that we're wired to believe that we're not in control of our lives?
Yeah, I think it's very difficult to deny that there exists a level of mental control on this planet that's been around for a very long time. And if we examine the roots of this control, I mean, that's rather a major undertaking. We don't have time for that right now. Frankly, there are better things to do as well, but it doesn't take much effort to see the dumbing down in Britain and America and Europe in the mainstream media. You don't have to look too hard to see that the government is not really representing the people very well. I do not feel it represents me in the slightest. I would be ashamed to think that Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or David Cameron or Theresa May in any way represented my personal conscious resonance, my sacred human lineage, or the ascendancy of my fellow kindred spirits. I would be ashamed to think of those people representing me. They do not represent me. So another powerful part of the unfoldment is to entirely detach from that false paradigm and understand that we have superseded those people morally, intellectually, spiritually, organically. We have left them behind. They have become obsolete now. That's no longer part of this world, this new paradigm. It's part of an old world that is going away. So if somebody says, what's 2012 about? The old world is going away, thank goodness.
Okay, well, I'm really taken by the power of your words and the authority by which you speak about yourself. I like that.
It's not myself. It's about something that we all have. It's not particularly present in anyone in particular. It's just something that from time to time we need to remind ourselves about. So you asked earlier about the unfoldment, what is it? And I said it's about an attitude. It is about an authority in what it is to be a human being, not as this kind of animal that strange things happen to, but as this divine presence that has total authority over its own existence.
You know, Neil, this is interesting because I realize that I'm looking at my notes as well as from our conversation earlier, and I noticed that in my notes about the monologue, I had left out a point, and the point was that one of the things I never understood was why people had to dress a certain way or be a certain way or act a certain way in some of these parades. And what came to me was that sometimes the pendulum swings the other way. Like, for example, a child trying to get their parents' attention will scream. And then once they have the attention, then they'll come back to a normal speech. So, but in talking to you now, I'm thinking we don't have to anymore swing the other way in order to create the balance, right? Mm-hmm. We can go straight to balance?
I think the balance is there. I think what we yearn for, what we strive for as kind of this multidimensional creature, this multidimensional manifestation, to be animals, to be men, to be women, to be artists and poets and warriors and lovers and all those lovely things that we do so well. To be that, you don't have to do anything. It's all there. What you have to do is strip away our bigotry and our conditioning and our prejudice, which we all have. And so, to some extent, purification is necessary, but not in some kind of scary Nazi way. because that's fake and weak. What I'm talking about is a purification in the way that you might determine the difference between a man, let's say in Christian theology, and an angel just being a being who has gone through thousands of years of growth and ascendancy and purified their consciousness to such an extent that they completely harmonize everything they do in the garden, in the kitchen, in the bedroom, in the workshop, whatever they craft, their words, their dreams, their thoughts. They create beauty, and beauty being very closely related to truth. And that truth is a very powerful resonance, and it's something that I feel we have inside us, and it's a natural, organic human thing. It's nothing special. It's just kind of deep down. And letting that out means that we can be that multidimensional man or woman and enjoy the human adventure, because it is magical, it is mysterious, it is wonderful. And that struggle element of it completely gets shattered, broken, and it's no longer a struggle at all. That's just nonsense. And so it's a very empowering philosophy, that I put forth in this book. And I'm very conscious as I do it. A lot of it is very old, and a lot of it is very classical, shall we say, going back thousands of years, 4, 5, 6, 7,000 years. But every now and again we forget it, and somebody comes along and says, well, let me describe it in this way. And then someone else says, well, let me describe it in this way. And so there's 100 books in a circle, and they each point to this thing in the middle. So I like to think perhaps I'm one of those books to say, well, if you have this cultural resonance of being a Westerner, of growing up with this media, of knowing these words, of being on these journeys, you might resonate with my words, because it is only my journey, this book, but you might like it. You might find something interesting in it.
You just might, and I know I already have. So if you want to know more about the book, you can go to neilkramer.com. That's NeilKramer. Neil, it feels like you're touching upon a little bit of emotional alchemy, so let's talk about that when we get back. And also, when you said that these people, meaning our political leaders, don't represent you, it brought up a really good question that I've asked other guests before, but never quite gotten the answer, and I have a feeling that you have it. So we'll be right back with Neil Kramer, our guest today, right after this.
There are self-help seminars costing thousands of dollars guaranteeing miraculous transformations. There are compelling speakers and life-changing weekend experiences where you can walk on fire. They all deliver revelations that guarantee you'll come back for the more expensive revelations filled with even greater wonder next month on Fiji. We get addicted to positive, heartfelt, expensive theater. What we really need is a jumpstart, an awakening, someone who can give us a reminder that everything we need lies within. Through inspiration and practical knowledge, Dorothy Donahue helps people get grounded and motivated, inspired and energized. It's not just words and affirmations and the power of intention. It's a mindset brought about by a tangible, transcendental experience, an audio-visual, physical, spiritual experience that helps us realize we transform ourselves. We get tools to become the conscious co-creators of lives of unlimited potential. Find out more. Go to DorothyDonahue.com.
You are listening to Life Changes with Filippo on the BBS Radio Network with our host, Filippo Voltaggio. You can hear tonight's show and all our past shows, which include luminaries such as David Wilcock, Mariel Hemingway, Giorgio Tsoukalos, Marcy Shimoff, and Shadow Stevens on our archive page at our website at lifechangeswithfilippo.com. That's Filippo, Filippo.com. Remember, you can also connect with us via Twitter and Facebook, and now in our own community at lifechangesnetwork.com, where real people come together to share real life in real time. That's lifechangesnetwork.com.
We're back. I am Filippo, and our guest today is Neil Kramer, author of his latest book, The Unfoldment. You can learn more about Neil at neilkramer.com. Where you can learn about this book and other books, and of course his workshops, interviews, lectures, teachings, etc., etc. just before the break, we seem to be touching upon emotional alchemy, and so Neil, I want to talk about that. But a quick question: you were saying how you would be embarrassed if Obama represented you, because he doesn't, and these people don't represent you. Yet it seems in this illusion that we are living, it seems that these people and others have power over some of us, and that things are being put in place to make some people's life much more difficult and in some cases a living hell. How do we deal with that?
There's an equation that makes sense of this. That is this. If you take ownership of your own destiny, and if you completely embrace your own life as the instrument for your own ascendancy, then there is no authority over you, and nobody can do anything to you without your consent. If you disavow your spiritual life, whatever that means to the individual, you know what that is personally to everybody, knows what that means to them. If you disavow your spiritual life, your divinity, or your source connection, or whatever you want to call it, your true human higher nature, then you give away your control and you forfeit the right to create reality. You give consent for anybody to take those reins and do whatever they want with your life. So when you get that equation, the answers begin to reveal themselves rather quickly. And to some extent, the fact that Obama and Cameron and Merkel and all the other crew are in place shows us what a sorry state of disavowal and disrespect human beings have created. And it's a gift, in a way. The darkness is a gift. It always is, to say, look how bad it can be. And then to turn that around, you have to turn it inward, because that is where the root lies. It's not outside. It's not a better politician. It's not a better party. It's about absolute ownership of your own existence.
Neil, your words are so powerful, and you speak with such determination, and I wish, and I know I can speak like that. I'm just thinking, is there room for doubt or days of doubt?
Well, we all have doubt. Everybody doubts things from time to time. You doubt whether what you're doing is enough. You doubt whether you're achieving your potential. You know, I like to think that the best we can do is to keep getting a bit better all the time. So if we doubt, my personal doubts would be, could I have done that better? And sometimes the answer is yes, and that's when doubt would happily creep in. And I think, well, never mind, because if I track my growth over a week or a month or a year or 10 years, I can see that I am becoming truer and stronger and better and fuller, more wholesome, more emotionally equipped, etc. And so you have to, a little bit, it's not about resting on your laurels at all. It's about, you know what it's like if you walk through a new city and you're chatting away with your friend, and then you look back and think, goodness me, we've come an awful long way, and I've kind of, you know, covered 5 miles there and didn't realize. We have to do that in our spiritual journey. Occasionally stand still, look side to side and think, wow, I've come a long way, that's good. And then turn back and carry on walking forwards. So, yeah, you have to acknowledge that you're never absolutely certain. Who can be? But you can be certain in your own movement.
Okay. Good, great answer. Emotional alchemy. Talk to us about that.
Well, this is very important. Emotional alchemy is changing one energetic manifestation into another, just like alchemy in the traditional laboratory sense, as we might imagine the alchemist taking all kinds of strange substances and base metals and earth and raindrops and so on and turning them into gold and all kinds of magical formulas. When we look at our emotions, do we really know what they are? Are they just chemical reactions to get us to procreate and pass on our genetic material? Well, I guess if you're a reductionist hard science dude, yes, that is what they're for. They're there to make you have sex and make babies. But if you have looked deeply into yourself, the answer is clearly a no. Emotions have a very particular multidimensional aspect. They show us things about the world that we don't have immediate logical access to. They're kind of like matrix downloads in a way. And there's a strong connection between psychic impulses and psychically gifted individuals and emotions. They usually go hand in hand. And we need to reframe what our emotions are. You cannot ascend organically, naturally, without absolutely embracing your emotional landscape. For women, a little easier, because it is a feminine impulse, not female, but feminine. Heartening to see, though, that most guys, big, strong, strapping firemen type guys, are starting to see the value of knowing their own emotional landscape, because it's not about just sharing with your wives or girlfriends or mothers or sisters. It's about knowing yourself. And it's about not allowing yourself to be driven by shadow, by fear or jealousy or inadequacy or low self-esteem, all those things. When you start to address that, you become more confident, you become more whole. And these aren't just classical therapeutic psychological kind of fantasies. This is the work, this is the unfoldment, this is the inner work of old. And if you were to be a druid of old, you would be tutored in what emotions are and how they affect us and what is the relationship between emotions and magic. How do they interact with each other? They are not separate. And that science is starting to return in dribs and drabs here and there. It never went away. It just kind of concealed itself for a little while. And I touch on that in the book. I mean, it's really a whole book in itself, but to begin to look at that, to understand woundedness and how it shapes people's lives, from traumas and difficult events and fears, and to say, no, we are equipped to go into the very darkest places, the very most difficult things, and dissolve them. And when you do that, that's the connection between being represented by very pale imitations of multidimensional human beings in the White House and real representatives, real men of honor and women of honor. That's the difference, because have they done their inner work? No, they haven't. And so that's where the disavowal comes into play. If we have hundreds of millions of Americans not doing it, hundreds of millions of Europeans not doing it, guess who represents them? People who don't do it.
Excellent points, and you bring up something that just is now a curiosity. Is there room for the warrior that has done his inner work?
There is only the warriors who do the inner work in my reality. I think every warrior you would look at, whether you were looking at classical warriors from our history, whether you were looking at modern, contemporary, iconic fictional warriors like a favorite of mine, Bruce Lee, for example. What is it that distinguishes, let's stick with Bruce Lee, we all kind of know who he is. What is it that distinguishes Bruce Lee from anyone else at that time in the 70s? What is it that distinguishes him? It's his attitude, and it's the fact that he understood the connection between his physical external expression and his internal emotional inner life. And if you go to the bookstore and look at books of Bruce Lee, you'll see 5 or 6 books about kung fu technique, and you'll see 25 books about thoughts, philosophies, interest, and that he had in his own life and in his own growth. Bruce Lee knew, and this is one of his own quotes, that knowledge without application is useless. And to apply knowledge, you have to actually bring it into your own life. And that means you have to do the inner work. And as any student of the martial arts will realize, you move from the external forms of kung fu and karate and taekwondo and aikido and so on to the inner forms, to the internal soft forms where the real energy is, where the real magic is. And that movement shows you that there isn't actually a clear distinction between inside and outside. There's not this person in our head and this world outside. That's not true. And you can discover that through the martial arts. And this little guy turned into a mighty, mighty warrior and a tremendous human being through discovering that and sharing it through fictional narratives. So for me, that's a nice representation. And his attitude also represents what it is to be a warrior, to fight little, but to have the mentality and the preparedness to do what you need to do when it's time.
Well, unfortunately, it's almost time for us to bring this interview to a close. And you've given so much already. And yet I know that in your book you talk about secrets and important secret teachings. And I thought if by chance in the next couple minutes we have remaining, you can talk about one of the most important secret teachings that you can share with us.
Well, if you swap the word secret with the word advanced, then it begins to make a bit more sense. Then one could say that the advanced teachings are reserved necessarily for the intermediate student, including myself, who is ready for more. It's not for beginners, it's not for the curious. And that sort of knowledge that our mystical schools all over the world until recent millennia refined that knowledge and guarded that knowledge and shared it amongst the men and women who were ready for it. And it was given freely to those who were able to hold it in their own hands. And the trick is to know who those people are. You have to meet them. And that means it's not appropriate to broadcast necessarily in books and pages and radios and screens. It has to become a face-to-face thing. So when we talk about secrets in books, we're always talking in principle and in parable and in metaphor. And there's a reason for that. But as I work with individuals, it has become clear to me that in my own personal life, I am reliving a very ancient energy exchange between student and teacher. And that role shifts frequently within my discourse with the people I work with, that I am the student as much as I am the teacher. But what we show each other is our preparedness to receive secret teachings and some of the keys of how reality is put together. And that information is encoded into the unfoldment for those who are ready to see it. Those principles are written in the pages, but you have to work for it.
And did you intentionally encode it, or that's how it comes to you to explain?
It's a little of each. There are some things encoded in there, but there is also some text written in such a way, as one might say, you don't want to disrespect your newcomers to the spiritual adventure. You don't want to treat them like babies. So you give them real, credible, authentic, genuine information. But you also know that there are other people who are going to pick these books up and listen to our words and stuff, who have been on the journey for a while, some many, many years longer than myself. And so you want to share at a higher level with those people. So there's a certain art form, just as there is in making a movie or writing a theatre play, to giving two plots at the same time, to giving a sub-narrative and watching those two move in parallel. So that's what I've tried to do with the book.
Well, there's an art form to interviews and answering questions, and I believe that this has been a beautiful one, beautiful representation of the higher thoughts that can be shared, and hopefully with more and more people that can listen and hear. So I thank you, Neil, for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's been a sincere pleasure. Hope to do it again soon.
Fantastic. Thank you.
The book is The Unfoldment, and we've been speaking with Neil Kramer. You can learn more about the book and his other books, his teachings, his writings, his workshops, etc. at neilkramer.com, NeilKramer.com. And we'll be right back with Mark Lejeune and our producer's wrap right after this.
Life Changes with Filippo is a premier radio show presented by Life Changes Network, which is a company whose team has dedicated their lives not only to positive change, but to helping others observe and embrace honor, and even celebrate their own changes, thus enabling a more positive, inspired life and helping to create a more positive and inspired world. From everyday people to corporate giants, celebrities, and children, we are here to help and to serve. With heart and experience, we bring our message and positive intent into your home or corporate office, and even through appearances on your favorite shows. If you wish to learn more about Life Changes Life Coaching and a private consultation with one of us, corporate event appearances, or if you would like us to appear on your radio or TV shows, visit lifechangeswithfilippo.com and click on our representation page. You are listening to Life Changes with Filippo on the BBS Radio Network with your host, Filippo Voltaggio. You can visit us online via Twitter and Facebook and at lifechangeswithfilippo.com. That's Filippo, Filippo.
We're back with Mark Lejeune and our producer's rep after this interview with Neil Kramer.
Neil Kramer. That was a good interview. There were a number of interesting perspectives. The one I dialed in on immediately was on the heels of your question, which I can't imagine why you would have asked that question, but given all of our discussions, or at least the one I'm speaking of, which led to contrast, right? The idea of is there room for doubt? Is there room for challenge or struggle or pain or all these other things that go along? And those play also into the system-related questions and that. But let's talk about where he went with it, which is, the idea of a preconceived plan, a soul contract, or whatever words would be used to define something like that. And I think that's a pretty interesting topic. Anybody that knows me knows my story, which I'm not going to repeat now because I've forgotten it.
Well, that's why you have good friends like me. I can.
Well, we only have another 10 minutes in this wrap, however.
Please continue.
But anybody knows that there have been some ups and some downs and a whole lot of stuff in between those. And quite often have I been forced to look at my own actions or the actions of others or the little guideposts that happen along the way, which kind of put me back on track or said, despite however bad that feels, that it was for a reason or that I'm going the right way or that I need to focus on not making that mistake again or having that experience again, if there are no such thing as mistakes. But the idea of that preconceived plan has always been interesting to me because I do believe that one thing that we all resonate with or most have to resonate with is the idea of things becoming stale in life, right? So if you have a certain experience, too much of anything is too much of anything. And so let's put ourselves in our God perspective. Too much good, too much, everything just happens the way I create it, that would probably get boring. So we set up this stage or this playing field, and we have a bunch of agreements, and we say we're going to come down here, we're going to experience a bunch of these things on our way to that score, that game end, or that goal that we're going after.
Mark, that's interesting. Not coincidentally, a couple of weeks ago, I was having a talk with an old friend from acting days, or rather high school acting, and she was telling me how, remember when I used to cry for you when you died on stage, and in the different roles that I played, I would experience different things. I was a father at one point while I was still in high school, but a father of a young girl, and I was a dashing lover who got killed. And I was Charlie Brown, who got made fun of. But that was my real life, so that couldn't tell which part I was playing. No, but the funny thing is that it was fun to die each night in that play. It's silly now that I think of it, but I could see where if we come down and say, hey, I'm gonna do this time and see what it's like with that problem.
Well, there was a guy that did a lot of writing years back, Bill something, Bill, I can't remember, it was Bill William, All the World is a Stage.
Yeah.
And no
Shakespeare.
Nevermore do I see it present in my dealings with my son. And just what you're saying is what people do for fun on the stage. And here's the interesting part, whether it's, obviously I'm referring to kids acting things out. And, he's all into the good and bad and the battles. And he's already Oscar worthy in his, being able to throw himself on the ground and, in the big melodramatic death scene, but, which is a little scary sometimes. However, then you have the method actors that immerse themselves into the character such that sometimes they don't get out, or it challenges them psychologically for months afterwards. Well, how interesting is that? You've psychologically put yourself in this tragic state willingly so you could recreate a character. But then people don't think of the possibility that we have put ourselves in this physical, psychological state so we could create this character and experience it.
Yeah. Yeah, like Neil, I started to see a pattern in some of the life coaching clients that I had, or in all of them actually, and in also all of the interviews. Everybody had a story of this happened to me. And when friends, for example, or whomever started with their, oh, do you know what happened to me? And if they started to tell it too dramatically or melodramatically, and I'm not taking anything away from them because I have my story too, and I've kept it close to my heart for a long time, like we just talked about, Mark, about getting rid of it or not telling it anymore. But the point is when they start with that energy of, well, you don't know what happened to me, I almost think boring, because everybody has one of those, but not everybody has what you did with it that's really cool and exciting.
Yeah. The react versus respond story, and all the that makes us individuals. That makes us unique, and that makes everybody has to have a different answer because we all have different programming. We all have different triggers. That's just some people, are retelling a story. Can you believe what he or she did? And they're recalling a response or reaction, not realizing, as crazy as that response or reaction might be, that it is actually feelings and emotions coming up from something that it reminded them of, maybe in childhood, maybe in adolescence, maybe, with an ex or whatever the story might be. And so there's so much more that could be at play, but yet we retell these stories and maybe some from judgment, without understanding the context with which they were reacting and responding from.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mark, what's ironic about this whole hour together is, after this weekend, I had finally gotten myself to the point, it's like, you know what? Let them have a parade and do what they want and walk, you dress like you want to dress and do what you want to do, and why not? And everybody should have one too. And now after this interview, I think, yeah, but when we really get it, we don't need anybody cheering us on or applauding. We don't need a parade.
Well, I think you're right. I think that's the authentic living part. Is who's the parade for? Is the parade for those that are parading, or is it for those that are cheering them on or deciding what position they still take, or are rooting for other friends that they wish were parading, or whatever else goes along with it?
Yeah, yeah, and yet though we don't need it, I do still like the celebrating each other. There's something, Barry Manilow, I made it through the rain and found myself respected by the others who got rained on too and made it through. And in a sense, that's kind of what Neil was saying, that he, kind of like the secret stuff. You can't tell everybody because they haven't made it through the rain, so to speak.
Yeah, very true. I think that's now a function of percentage. You can't, or perception. You can't really see from somebody else's perspective. And, those that haven't opened up to the extent of being willing to look at what they need to look at, obviously can't see from the perspective of those that can. And that's what makes our individuals so unique and so different, or our individual journeys so unique and so different.
Absolutely. And Mark, actually you and I were talking earlier today about somebody who I saw had all these issues, and I felt so much compassion for him because I used to have so many of the same. But my question now to myself is, what are the judgments I have on other people's issues that maybe I haven't gone through myself to be able to get to the point and say, yes, I did that too.
Yeah, well, it's an ongoing process.
And it's a rhetorical question, by the way.
Okay.
I'll take care of that. And with that, we come to, are you telling me to close the show?
No, you're welcome to continue. We got a couple more minutes.
No, with that, we bring to a conclusion yet another great producer's wrap and another great show with our guest Neil Kramer. Mark, thank you very much. I thank Dorothy Donahue for producing the show and for bringing Neil Kramer to us. Mark Lejeune for the producer's wrap and producing the show. Seth Hendricks, our engineer, and I thank myself, Filippo Voltaggio, for being here with you every week as all our lives change together. Ciao, everyone.
You have been listening to Life Changes with Filippo with the Master of Change, Filippo Voltaggio. Listen live every Monday night at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on the BBS Radio Network and visit us online at lifechangeswithfilippo.com. That's Filippo, Filippo. Today's show has been made possible in part by our sponsors, Ionways Water Systems, Change Your Water, Change Your Life, and Love and Miracles with Dorothy Lee Donahue. To learn more about them, visit the sponsor page of our website. Once again, join us here next week as we consciously explore and embrace the only constant, life changes. Now's the time.